Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's virtual office hour. My name is Cassandra McGee, and I'm a Senior Program Manager with JFF, and we are glad you chose to join us for today's discussion. The topic is working with local workforce development boards and their partnerships within youth apprenticeship. The discussion will be led by Mark Genoa, an Associate Director with JFF. And as a reminder, this session will be recorded, so please ensure your phone line is muted if you are not the primary speaker. However, if you do have questions or comments based upon today's topic, feel free to throw those in the chat box, or during the live question and answer section, you can participate that way. Also, this session is funded as part of the U.S. Department of Labor's Youth Apprenticeship Intermediaries Project that JFF is running. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our presenter, Mark Genoa. Mark.
Thank you, Cassandra, and good afternoon or good morning to everyone here, depending on where you're coming from. Like Cassandra mentioned, my name is Mark Genoa. I'm an Associate Director at JFF. Been with JFF in the Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning for a little over a year now, where as of right now, I lead one of the major manufacturing projects coming out of the center, which is USDOL funded, as well as work in other areas, currently including IT right now. But prior to JFF, and obviously what brings me here to talk about this topic is I worked for about 6 years at Philadelphia Works, which is the Workforce Development Board for the city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And there I started up and led their apprenticeship work. I was the director of apprenticeship strategies there. And that was really kind of in line with kind of this modern apprenticeship movement. The Philadelphia Works, the board received an American Apprenticeship Initiative, or AAI grant, and they created this new position that I stepped into and led this that 5-year grant initiative, as well as started up the more modern apprenticeship activities in the region. You can go to the next slide, please. So while at Philadelphia Works, one of our focuses of not one of the focus of our American Apprenticeship grants was opportunity youth and putting them in positions in the IT and healthcare sector. At my time at Philadelphia Works, and including, my time at JFF, I've worked, from a board perspective, a lot with youth apprenticeship programs, both out of school and in school programs. Today for the next 15, 20 minutes before we get to any question and answers, I kind of want to touch on a couple points and kind of give you some examples of what I saw work in Philadelphia with different partners, trying to work with the board, as well as, the board in Philadelphia working with the various regional boards here in PA, and including all the boards throughout PA, and how we can work together in one cohesive unit. What would be helpful too while I'm talking is if I want to get an idea of who's attending today and where you're coming from. So if you don't mind, if you could just plug in your name and your organization, your company in the chat, kind of get a good idea if we do have any boards in the room, and or if we have mostly CBOs or any employers, so I can kind of structure my conversation that way. So just kind of throw up your name and your organization in the chat. That would be helpful. Excellent, thank you. And I see we have a board right here from Florida, so that's great. As I mentioned, as the local workforce development board in Philadelphia, we really felt that at the time that they could drive a lot of the apprenticeship work in the region. And there was a couple key areas that I'm going to discuss today that I felt were most successful in working with other partners. But bottom line is, a board, your local board, your state board, or your other regional boards in your area can really be vital partners to youth apprenticeship programs, particularly now when hopefully we're coming in that post-pandemic times, that there can be a vital resource in terms of services that they can provide that you can partner up with, and or the different funding that does come through workforce boards, that traditionally come through workforce boards through WIOA and TANF funding. But now I know some boards are receiving various emergency funding coming down from the state or federal level. So there's different ways you can access that funding as well. But the first point, next slide, please. The first point I want to talk about is leveraging services. In just to give you some context in Philadelphia, the workforce board in Philly is it's a nonprofit, and I know a lot of boards are nonprofits, but it was connected to the city government in that the current mayor of the city of Philadelphia, would appoint the executive director or president of the board, as well as the board of directors. So we did have that tie into the local government, so we were kind of seen as a quasi-governmental agency with that separate nonprofit status. But obviously, Philadelphia is the largest workforce board in Pennsylvania, considering that Philadelphia is the largest urban area population-wise in Philadelphia. So we had a extensive network there that we could tap into, seeing that the apprenticeship work and the apprenticeship staff at the board was relatively small. Really it was, just me to start as the dedicated apprenticeship staff with the board. And by my ending time there, we grew to three people. But still that, and with the other programs we were helping with small staff, we really looked to leverage the services and the different staff that the board already had naturally built in. And a couple of the key areas we did that. One is in case management. So, youth apprenticeship, obviously there's a huge case management aspect to it, be it in school and or out of school youth, if your program primarily deals with. Just because, these are youth, that you're dealing with. Some are still kind of in high school, about to graduate, so they still need direction and support as they enter that next phase of their life. Particularly in an apprenticeship where they're potentially taking college level classes as well as entering the workforce. But of course, in out of school youth as well, where a lot of times, youth might have been separated for some years in school and are looking to get back in. So case management is a vital support. And a lot of times, sometimes youth programs don't have the capacity to support that. So we really looked to our what PA calls the career link centers, what nationally they're known as American Job Centers, because they had case management functions already built in. They had case management staff at each career link center. We had 5 in Philadelphia that were meant to provide that support to participants in training programs, in employment, and then just general in educational as well. So, instead of or not having the money to go out and have that case management support, really tapped into these dedicated case managers at the various career link centers, made sure the youth in these programs were getting registered at the career link centers, and then they could take access of this case management services, and make sure these case managers were part of the almost daily operations of these programs, so they could be keyed into what these youth might be experiencing on the programmatic side, so they could deal with them. So that's one area. Assistance in employer outreach and engagement. Again, obviously, employer engagement is a huge aspect of any apprenticeship, be it youth or adult apprenticeship, to get more employers involved, so they can take on more apprentices. And again, like I said, it was only me and a couple other folks, dedicated apprenticeship staff, and sometimes these youth programs don't have dedicated apprenticeship staff. It's sometimes part of their or half of someone's job. And so, we really look to tap into the career link centers who had dedicated employer engagement responsibilities to work with them and access their network. They had a network that some had been at these career link centers for quite some time. So they had built up a well-established network. They had placed individuals in these companies, and really it was working with these employer outreach staff at the career link centers to get them more acclimated to an apprenticeship, what these programs are, how they're structured, so they could be empowered to talk with their employer network and to draw these employers into the program. So that was one key, definitely, in successful youth apprenticeship programs in the Philadelphia region. Um, Access to labor market information. So Philadelphia Works, they had a dedicated staff, and I know some boards do. Really, that it's their jobs to see what the current labor market information is, pull together. A lot of times, Philadelphia Works was pulling together information for the city of Philadelphia, since we were connected into them to inform their jobs programs, their policy guidance. And really, this can be helpful within an apprenticeship program, too, to identify what occupations are in the most need. And then talking with employers to potentially add new occupations to your youth apprenticeship program. So again, definitely no expert on labor market information. I can read it and understand it at a baseline level, but in terms of accessing the full kind of suite of data that's out there, and being able to manipulate it to produce the information that would inform programs, new program updates, new occupations. It was extremely helpful to lean on that staff who were experts on it to really inform what youth apprenticeship programs, occupations which they should be going after next. Lastly, connection to training providers and partners. So, the board, traditionally funds different training programs connected in all different industries. So really, in the youth apprenticeship program, you're always looking to add new partners to bolster your program, to support it, to make it more in line with employers and industries are demanding. So that network of the different partners that the board is connecting to, that could be that definitely can be an asset to youth apprenticeship who are looking to add an additional component, be it just kind of baseline, general information, general curriculum to get apprentices up to speed, and or more industry specific training that could be incorporated into an apprenticeship program. And lastly, the idea of recruitment services. So much like I mentioned, leaning on the American Job Center and Career Link staff to supporting case management, to supporting employer outreach, we also look to support them in recruitment services, because again, they had a connection into the local population here in the city, the local job seekers, including youth. So when a youth apprenticeship program was, recruited a new cohort, we would go to them, and they would assist in helping us identify individuals to enter into the program, and even provide that precursory screening process for these programs. So really, the youth that were getting to these programs and getting ready to interview with employers were ready to go and well suited for the program. And um, what really helped from the different staff was we actually developed what was called an apprenticeship navigator program. So in partnership with the Keystone Development Partnership, or KDP, in the state of Pennsylvania, they actually took this apprenticeship navigator program and got it registered in the state of PA as an apprenticeship. So it's basically a registered apprenticeship to train workforce professionals on different aspects of apprenticeship, so they could go out into the field and recruit employers and develop programs. So a lot of these career link staff that were helping out with us in this program, we actually put them through a year-long apprenticeship training. So again, they were better equipped to help us, to help Philadelphia as a whole, and the board, enhance more, develop more programs and enhance the apprenticeship system. The second is, a board can be that convener of partners. Really, apprenticeship funding, obviously, there's a lot out there. There's a lot that has been put out there, a lot coming out, and typically that develops, call it a healthy competition around funding, between program providers, between different community-based organizations. And really, I envisioned it when I was at Philadelphia Works, and what the board envisioned it is, we really have no kind of, we're taken out of that competition. Traditionally, we're not competing for the same funding that these different programs. We may kind of partner up to go after funding, but we can be that kind of quote unquote nonpartisan voice that's coming in and really organizing the different stakeholders in the region, in the apprenticeship, and really drive the model as a cohesive unit rather than individual programs. And that's what we really tried to do, and what the current director in my position is trying to continue, is being that convener of partners to drive the programs as an youth apprenticeship system in the Southeast PA region, and not these different standalone programs. So really, to bring these different partners, that they're working better together, that they're utilizing funding more efficiently, that they're leveraging each other's funding, be it funding that they're getting on an annual basis from the board, and or funding that they're trying to go after, and or develop partnerships out of this. Programs that might have been similar, operating together, might find reasons to join and make it one program. That way, funding can be accessed better through that program. And one thing I'm going to put a website here in the chat is the kind of the collaborative that we started in the Philadelphia region, and that's continuing today with the new director that's in my position, and the partners there, was called Apprenticeship PHL. And that's the website, which is currently under kind of a 2.0 update right now. But really, that was a collaborative with Philadelphia Works as the head that was launched probably about 4 or 5 years ago now, and really brought together the different partners in apprenticeship, be it employers, different community colleges, various community-based organizations, training providers to come together to and provide updates and really collaborate and move the system, apprenticeship system in the region forward even more. So, again, a workforce board can be that key, that convener to really drive the systematic approach rather than the individual programmatic approach. Next slide, please. And then this other point, advocacy. Well, in PA, one thing, boards can have a strong voice in terms of where their policy goes in terms of how they dictate their funding. But in Pennsylvania, the boards really collaborate, and they're required to collaborate by the state in a variety of functions. So, we really took it here in Philadelphia, not as just a kind of an urban city approach, but really a regional approach. So we worked a lot with the boards right outside the city of Philadelphia throughout the Southeast PA region, and really incorporated this work, this policy, and the different plans that boards are required to develop. So in Pennsylvania, the board was to develop a yearly local plan as well as a yearly regional plan, as they called it. And this would really dictate the board's activity as well as the funding that were going to be devoted in each area. So really, we advocated for, more youth apprenticeship, particularly youth apprenticeship, to be incorporated into these plans. So again, it was set up for success that the year we knew how much funding was going to be allocated to these programs. And two, we know the boards and to tell the state that this region really believed in the apprenticeship model and could really drive it. And again, it would inform the state policy that they were putting out to the other boards and to the other region in PA as well. And again, as I mentioned, we had that local connection into the city of Philadelphia. So we really worked hand in hand with the mayor and his office to really drive the apprenticeship system here on the local level, as well as work with the state, particularly PA is a state apprenticeship agency. So we really work closely with the SAA here to really guide their policy, because they were a relatively new SAA in PA. So they're really developing their framework, what policy would, kind of dictate the different apprenticeship funding they were giving out, how they would go about registering and approving programs. And we really helped them kind of inform that policy and see our kind of our work come out in the different guidance and different new policies that came out. For example, PA about 3 years ago implemented a registration process for pre-apprenticeship programs. And that was really instrumental in driving more funding to pre-apprenticeship programs, because the state could now certify which programs they could fund through this process. And that was through kind of the growth of pre-apprenticeship programs, particularly as they lead into youth apprenticeship programs, and our work as well as the other boards' work to kind of advocate for this process so more funding could be devoted to pre-apprenticeship as well as apprenticeship programs. Next slide, please. Funding support. So this was a big thing, particularly obviously, with youth apprenticeship programs, always, utilizing new funding streams is always a good way to develop, to grow programs, to grow staff, to have new cohorts. And at the board, as I said, as I started, we were really looking to dedicate some funding to youth apprenticeship programs. So we looked at funding that boards always typically receive on an annual basis, and that was through our WIOA and TANF funding. So the WIOA funding, we really look to the on-the-job training wage reimbursements and the individual training counts to support different aspects of a youth apprenticeship programs. So for those who aren't familiar, who may not be kind of experts in board funding, on-the-job training wage reimbursements are there for employers in traditional employment to really refund a portion of wages for new employees hired that are, the idea is that their first, say 3 to 6 months, they're spending, the employer is spending time training them up to the position, so they have ability to get some of those wages reimbursed back to them to kind of offset some of the costs to start up. Particularly, when employers are hiring out of the career link system in PA, and individuals that are either not fully experienced in that occupation. It was a kind of an enticement to hire them. In PA, if I remember correctly, in Philadelphia, it was that employers could get up to 50% of their wages reimbursed back to them for the first, I think it was 3 months of training, if my memory serves me correctly. So in terms of a youth apprenticeship program, we looked to take that model and build that in. So typically during a probationary period of an apprenticeship, which is 3 months, that if an employer were to take on an apprentice, that first 3 months, 50% of that salary they paid out to the apprentice would be reimbursed back to them. With the idea is now they're through the first third of their training, and now they can continue on as better trained individuals. So that was an enticement for employers to take on new apprentices, to start apprenticeship programs. And then two, looking at individual training accounts or ITAs, we really looked at that to support the related technical instruction aspect of a youth apprenticeship program. Because traditionally ITAs, career link individuals, job seekers could access that money to participate in different training activities, to participate in different educational, either educational certificates they were going after. So really took that and applied that to the related instruction. So if a youth apprenticeship was utilizing an external partner and that there was a cost to that, they could access those ITAs to pay for that the related instruction portion. So with those OJTs and ITAs, they could support both sides of an apprenticeship program, which was nice little funding kind of collaboration we put together to support these programs. Now, it took a bit to work through the different the policy, the nuances, the different reporting requirements that come along with this, and that was a close working relationship with the staff at Philadelphia Works and other boards that work in that side of the house to make sure they're meeting their requirements in terms of what they're obligated to report on the WIOA and on the WIOA level to the state, and that it was fitting nicely into the apprenticeship program. What was nice in PA that when an apprenticeship was registered in PA, it automatically got added to the eligible training provider list, or ETPL, and that was enabled programs to access the ITA dollars, which outside of an apprenticeship, that was a little bit lengthy process to get on that list. So there was one benefit the state provided registered apprenticeship, that automatic inclusion on the list, so they could access these ITA dollars. And again, another aspect outside of kind of the OJTs and ITAs, we used other what we call other dedicated apprenticeship WIOA funding to really support and drive pre-apprenticeship and youth apprenticeship programs. When I was at Philly Works, we initiated an RFP process where we were putting out funding for youth apprenticeship programs. It was in IT, healthcare, and the skilled trades. And it was a competitive process where programs would apply for, receive this funding, and be able to support programs for both. It was mostly an out of school youth population, but there was definitely some funding dedicated with in school youth population. And that was the first time that the board had put out apprenticeship funding in that way. So again, that was a close working relationship with the youth funding manager and making sure that program would adhere to the various reporting requirements. And then, of course, the board would partner with various programs and other federal and state grants. And I believe that's my last slide, isn't it, Cassandra? Yeah. So yeah, I know we have about 6 minutes left, and I saw a couple questions come up in the chat. One about, could I get a copy of the policy documents? I'll do some digging through my files, and I'll actually reach out to the current director there to see if we can dig out some stuff that we were successful with the current mayor. So I'll get back to you on that. And then the from Amber was best practice ineligible participants. Yeah, that was so yeah, eligible participants for WIOA. So I think that with I don't think I know with that we really relied on our knowledgeable recruitment staff who did that. As I mentioned in my earlier slide, is we really leaned on some of the expert staff at the Career Link or American Job Center staff that was involved in recruiting. And these folks were, typically recruiting for WIOA programs. So they were experts in who would qualify and who would not qualify. So they, could be those screeners. And once I mentioned those screening services, they could be those screeners just to know they could refer people who could access WIOA dollars before, they would get further along in the process and we found out they could not. But then, obviously we had situations where there were ineligible participants, maybe through that initial screening. And that's where braided funding would really come in key. So, I think it was rare. I can't remember a program that was fully funded by WIOA funding, be it OJTs or ITAs. Typically, it was a combination of this WIOA funding combined with, different grant, state or federal grant funding that would support these programs. So we would do it in a way where the funding, the programs would braid it so there would be ability of both eligible and ineligible participants to access this. So, we would reserve that grant funding for the support the ineligible side of things, and then the WIOA funding where we could with the eligible participants. So it was really kind of obviously closely monitoring and planning, making sure the funding was reserved and can be used in kind of all the right ways. So that's kind of how we did that. We leaned on staff as well as, braided funding was key as well. Any other questions? Yeah, pre-apprenticeship. Yeah, correct. So, yeah, pre-apprenticeship, especially dealing with youth apprenticeship. There was a pre-apprenticeship aspect, even if we called it that or not. Pretty much in all that in all the program we did. One, especially in the in-school youth population, we really look to leverage the Philadelphia's pretty robust career tech ed programs they have going into high schools. Obviously Philadelphia is the largest school district in PA, and one of the largest in the country, and they have a history of career tech ed programs from everything and anything from the skill trades to culinary. So we really use that as a start and really a pre-apprenticeship and look to connect into the programs, into the different either pre-apprenticeship officially or kind of apprenticeship programs that were happening, because we felt that a lot of times the students had the interest, they received the initial training so they could be fitted right in there. When you deal with out of school youth, that was definitely a huge aspect pre-apprenticeship, and because as I mentioned, a lot of times, it's as probably many folks know, a lot of this youth who come to these programs have been disconnected from school work for quite some time. So they need that accelerated training to be ready for an apprenticeship, because we didn't want them to place them with an employer in an apprenticeship and have them fail due to a lack of training right away. So we developed almost always pre-apprenticeship programs to get them skilled up so they're ready to go in the apprenticeship. And that included industry specific skill training, be it for healthcare. That was big here in the Philadelphia region. IT was another big one, as well as the skill trades. So we really looked to skill them up industry wise, but also kind of case management wise. We had case managers devoted to them while in the pre-apprenticeship. So ideally, a lot of the issues personal that might have been affecting their ability to work, be it trying to find stable housing, trying to find other kind of means to continue into the program, that was hopefully solved for the meantime, before they entered the apprenticeship, and then going into the apprenticeship, look to continue that case management support. So yeah, pre-apprenticeship was a huge part of anything youth apprenticeship wise we did here. Did you do any data sharing or establish metrics to measure success? Um, yeah, we did. We did. So, there was various reporting that we had to do. As I mentioned, these programs were, braided funding, from discretionary grants as well as from these formula WIO and TANF funds. So we had different metrics we had to meet, and different times we had to meet them. So there's definitely data sharing going on for what funding we were provided versus other grant funding that we were providing. Because typically in grants, the metrics had to be reported on maybe on a quarterly basis, but with WIOA funding, that's a little more often and a little more nuanced. Those metrics had to be reported, so it took kind of data sharing between all the different points the individual was hitting throughout the program. So we definitely share data, establish metrics on what we envision success. And I see Cassandra's moving us along. So I guess I'm going to turn it back to her. And I believe I think my email address is on one of these slides. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have any further questions or want to set up further discussions with me. So thanks again for letting me participate, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much, Mark, for giving a great presentation, information about working with workforce development boards. Mark's email was on the previous slide, but if you want further information or to connect with Mark, feel free to reach out to me as well. And thank you so much for those that join us today and pose questions. If you want to continue the conversation with us, we do have some upcoming office hours, as well as there's a community of practice that you can join where there's a lot of different resources regarding youth apprenticeship and then also upcoming training sessions. So thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to chatting with you next time. Have a great rest of your Monday.